All right, let's do this.
Okay. Yeah, so I think to go over this, I kind of just want to go over to start like almost every file. Not like the details of the file, but like the structure and like why it's there. Because I think that'll basically capture like everything we have and why we have it.
Yeah.
So you guys can see everything. It's clear on my screen.
Yeah, by the way, how do I full screen? Do you guys know how to full screen?
Yeah, there's this 3 dot on the top right. You click that and then.
Damn, I don't have that.
No, that just switches the broadcast. I don't think there is a full screen mode because I guess we're using it kind of like Zoom. But... Yeah. Whoops.
I have it there.
AJ, I think you can just zoom your browser. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, make your window full screen. That's what I just tried.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks better. It just increase the zoom on the browser tab. Yeah. I don't know. All right. All right, start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything's clear on my screen, right? You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just the same repo I use for the talk. So there's like a few things in there that are specific to the talk, but overall it's the base. Just kind of let's go through this. Yarn lock, obviously nothing crazy there. This vtest config, this is just a part of our new starter. I increased the timeout here because I meant to use for integration tests, and integration tests take a little longer. But other than that, you don't really need anything in here. TS config at the root. This is using Node 16. Nothing crazy there. SC-JSON, same. README is from our starter. That probably needs to be updated. All right, so package JSON. Most of this is from our starter. I just have that profile in there. The demo. It's type check command. Other than that, nothing crazy here either. We have 3 workspaces for this: backend, web, and GraphQL. I'll go over that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, that's there. Context end. Does that all make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I'm just curious, why is there a GraphQL workspace? But you're gonna go over it.
Yeah, I'll go over that. I didn't have that before, but I added that in recently. All right, backend folder. Again, CS config. The only thing that's interesting in here is this alias. So instead of making core its own repo or own subpackage, we just made an alias. It kind of avoids the compilation things, and you can like use refactoring stuff to rename stuff across packages. So it's like, just cleaner. Other than that, just includes the functions folder and the core folder. These things here, this is for the ESM and getting top level await and stuff like that. All right. So going to core, we have this SQL file. There's maybe an argument to say that this should be not part of the starter, and then maybe it should be like a library. But the pattern I have here is I export this empty interface. So this is where you define, again, this is just for RDS. This is where you define all your tables. I don't really like having to go into this file every time I need to add a new table and like having a huge list here where it's centralized. So I'm using that pattern where I just do an empty thing, and I'll show you how I like load stuff in a decentralized way. Other than that, just initializing Kaisley with the RDS information. This is using V2 SDK. I think we should just do everything V3. So I need to update that. Our current Kaisley bridge is using V2.
Hey, Dax, sorry, I didn't quite catch the database, the empty part. If we don't put it here, where are we putting that?
Yeah, I'll show you in a second how that works. There's a trick where you can define an empty interface and then fill it from separate, like a bunch of different files.
Oh, and preserve the types, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think we do this in I think this might be the first place we're doing this. I have this row thing here. I'll explain what this is later as well. Okay, so we have this SQL module. This is what you'll use interact with RDS.
I think you mentioned about like the CDK v3. I think that would just increase the bundle size for Lambda, right?
Yeah, but I actually found out that if you're using ESM, you can't use the built-in thing anyway. So it's increasing whether we use V2 or V3. Because the thing they deploy with the V2 is this common JS, and you can't import that. You can with some hacks, but it's just not worth it. Yeah.
Is it because some other library we're using is ESM?
We need, well, everything we're doing in this and all our starters is now ESM. It just simplifies a few things, and it gives us top level await, which ends up being necessary for config loading.
Right.
But yeah, I just figured at this point, if you're starting a new project, you should just do ESM. I think I saw someone from AWS, one of the issues, saying they're going to have the ESM version in the runtime. So we'll be able to switch it soon. But for now, it's bundled.
Right. Does that mean if user they want to write their application code, I guess to use or this ideal stack, they need to adopt ESM, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to look like anything explicit to the user, because if they kind of already were writing ESM, they just didn't know. Like if you're using import statements, you're using ESM.
Yeah.
But anyone using like require statements and stuff, like, yeah, that won't work the same way anymore.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So SQL module. Think about whether this is in here or if it's like hidden behind a library. Okay, then this article module. So this is using something called declaration merging. So this database interface I defined earlier, I'm like augmenting it with the tables here.
I see.
I'm including articles, comments. And what's nice about this is you can keep everything close to where you're using it. So if you have like another, I'll call it authors or something, you would just have the author table in there. And that's why it's like spread across your database, is not in like one giant place.
Got it. And the declare module line is just specifying which file or which it goes into, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is the same pattern that I think we'll use for the event bus. It's the same thing where you can define your events like across your database, but there's still a single publish function that'll like know about all of them.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So this is the stuff I went over in the talk. We have like these functions here. Add comment. I was actually thinking in this, I don't know what you guys think about this, but in the starter, should we have it be like a full app with this stuff and you can just delete it? Or it should be more blank?
I think it should be a full app.
It should?
Jay can't hear you. Oh, you muted. You should, right? You cannot, or no?
I think it should be a full app, yes.
Yeah, I should be. So I was.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
To be a full app, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but I think it's helpful to see how everything comes together.
Hey Dax, yeah, like what do you feel about this? Why does it need the SQL.db insert into? Is that DB the name of the database or?
So this other pattern I do is, so you could import the DB directly.
Oh, it's our thing. Okay, I see.
Yeah, but I think the ideal situation is you import SQL and it just goes like that.
I see.
But because, yeah, like I'm exporting, you have to you can't like flatten this. This pattern makes sense everywhere else, because like if you are in some other file, you probably want to do article.list as opposed to just importing list, which you can do, but I feel like this like is hard to read. It's like, what is it listing? So because of that, I like every module, I'm like exporting all of it under like a namespace like this.
Right.
Like this. That's like another little trick, like this line here. It's like exporting everything in this file under this like article namespace. But I mean, you don't have to do that. You can, like, if you want to do something like article comments, you can like prefix everything here, then import them specifically and still have it be readable. I don't know. I prefer this pattern though.
I see. So sorry, I missed the thing you just mentioned. Right, we could do which trick? Prefix with.
Yeah. So if let me get rid of this column. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
So if you go to this, the different file, you just import list. This isn't very clear.
Right.
So, but you can just rename article. You can make it article list.
Ah, I see.
And here it's article list, and you can prefix every single function with article list, article create, article comment.
Oh, yeah.
A little better for tree shaking, but I just don't really like that pattern as much.
I think the tree shaking is it's the thing you mentioned. If you export everything, re-export everything, it doesn't tree shake properly, right?
Oh yeah. So before I used to have like an index.ts here, and I would do something like export from article.
Right.
I would do this for each like module I had.
Yeah.
And then it's nice because you can just go into core, then like, well, I did change this won't work, but you could like see everything you can import here.
Right.
But yeah, the ES build ends up bundling everything. It doesn't tree shake well. So we can't use index files anymore. You have to like do the path to the thing. It's okay because it still gives you the right thing there.
Yep.
Okay, back to this file. Any questions on this at all?
So this thing in core is like almost like the model layer, right? Of like the MVC thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the most extreme version of this is that hexagonal pattern. It's like a lot more intense than this. You like separate, like, so right here we have both our persistence and our business logic together. There they even separate those, like the business layer calls into like a persistence layer, and the business layer isn't aware of whether it's going into SQL or Dynamo or whatever. I think this is a good compromise where you can still kind of separate your logic by your domains. Like I have articles, I have authors, etc., and everything's in one place. But yeah, it's like a mix of, some people call it like the repository. It's like a mix of the repository and like the business logic all together.
Yep.
Okay. So any other questions on this file?
Nope. I guess this is a file that this is the only file we need to tweak if you want to swap with like DynamoDB or PlanetScale or anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm eager to do a DynamoDB version of this. Yeah, especially with that ElectroDB library. Like it's very simple.
Right.
Maybe even simpler than the RDS in some ways, because you don't have to think about migrations, at least initially.
Right.
Okay. So that's a core thing. This will grow one file per concept as you add stuff. I have this flattened as single files, but I think people generally will have something like this, because they might break this down into multiple files, but it's up to them to do that.
Yeah.
And we have functions. So this is a list of all of your functions. Obviously, initially we just have a GraphQL function, but you'll probably have stuff once we add event bus, and whether you add it yourself or we add that as part of the template, you'll have like your event bus handlers in here, and you like queue handlers. We'll make a list, make a folder for each one of them, or one folder, and it can have like 5 functions in it, however you want to organize it.
Right.
So the entry point of this is here. Just handler, create GraphQL handler. There's a few options here. I don't have to go into this right now, but I think we should add, this is like what we'll add to that envelope thing you were looking at. Like this would be the area where we add like envelope plugins, and you can add envelope plugins if that's something we support.
Is that similar to the middleware idea?
Yeah, I think the envelope plugins is kind of like a middleware framework, but it's very GraphQL focused.
Got it.
Yeah, I've like seen all the plugins, and I've seen like the big library of them. I don't know like the specification yet for how they work, but I've seen like plugins for all kinds of stuff, so it seems pretty powerful.
From the envelope people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that works with anything. Like it just requires a like this type, this GraphQL schema type, and it'll work with anything that is using that.
Got it.
So this is coming from our GraphQL package. This is just a very Lambda optimized GraphQL server. That's the thing that's using Helix.
Yep.
So I like tried a bunch of other stuff. Like I tried Apollo, Yoga. This comes in, like ours comes in as the smallest. Because I don't think anyone else is really optimizing for that. So,
right.
So I'm going to import here is the schema.
Yeah.
So the schema file is here. So this is where you like. How do I explain this? Maybe this is the wrong order. Let me edit.
Where's builder?
Yeah. This is a weird thing with my editor. I can't figure it out. I think it's because it's ignoring. It like doesn't show up in my file structure, but it's here. For some reason, it's not showing it to me. I think I have something messed up in my settings. Huh?
Is this because there's a word build in there?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I've like build ignored somewhere, but like look, it's right here. You can see it. If we'll start with this. So this is all Pothos. The schema builder we import, you initialize it. I'm creating just 2 empty query mutation types, but this is like the main thing used to define everything in it's like weirdly ignored, but so this is boilerplate. You just define it here. Pothos has a lot of really good plugins, and I was gonna explain this earlier. So I think your order of priority is ideally there's a Pothos plugin because that's going to be the most native and integrated. So he has plugins for authorization. So that's kind of similar to the GraphQL Shield. He has plugins for validation. When we use the Pothos plugins, there's like really great type safety across the board. So we should generally recommend people to use those. And then if there's other stuff that they want to do that it doesn't really make sense for Pothos to have natively, like the Sentry integration, then we should let people use the envelope plugins. So we support both, but Pothos is like for like 99% of what you need is probably going to be in there.
Okay.
There's just like the special stuff that you use envelope for.
Can you give us like a quick comparison of like at what abstraction level is the envelope working at, and at what abstraction level is Pothos? It seems Pothos is like schema level, right? The other one was request level. I might be wrong.
Yeah, so I think so. Pothos is a way to. It's a framework, and the output of the framework is. What happened? Hang on. If people are seeing this, they're not going to want to copy my editor setup anymore. So the whole point of Pothos is to, at the end, call this to schema.
Yeah.
This is a GraphQL schema. This is like a standardized type from the GraphQL JS library. It's like universal. Everyone like generates that. And it contains both the schema and also like the JavaScript code to execute like a query, mutation, everything. It contains everything you need to run. So the envelope plugins are operating off of this. So once this schema has been generated, once a request comes in, it like understands the shape of the schema. It can trigger things. It can do things. So pretty powerful. But the Pothos plugins are operating before this. So they'll do a better job of like following Pothos patterns, like extending the types there, like giving you like a bunch of type safety stuff. They kind of help you during development, whereas the envelope plugins kind of just are a runtime thing.
Got it.
Yeah.
But they're looking at the GraphQL schema, not the TypeScript types that we are creating.
Yeah, exactly. And a specific example is, so Pothos has a validation plugin. I don't have it set up here, but once you have it set up, this will show up. There'll be like a validation thing that shows up here, and you can say like, it actually just uses Zod. So you can say that this needs to be an email, it can't be an empty string, etc. So for validation, we should try like, I think most people should just use Pothos because it's nicely integrated. Like you can use like GraphQL, like the guild has something called GraphQL scalars that also kind of do the same thing, but because it's at like a different part of the stack, it is not going to feel as integrated.
And if it doesn't pass this validation, the request will fail.
Yeah, and like GraphQL has like a decent error like structure, so it'll like tell you if you did a query with and you're querying like 10 things, but you pass in the wrong argument for the third thing, it'll tell you, okay, your error was at this part of the query.
And at what step is Pothos catching the error? Like when the request?
Yeah, so basically, if you add a validation plugin here, I think it fires that right before this resolve function is called.
I see.
So it like wraps your resolve function in the validator before giving it to GraphQL schema.
I see.
Yeah. So I think the Pothos plugin system can, I think it probably is just very simply, it can do stuff before the request. I think it can do stuff after the request. And the way it's structured, it can like augment all the types here to make it feel more native.
Oh, so Pothos doesn't just do converting a type to schema. It can, right? It also does this, point to where it's being resolved.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
So if I think it's helpful just to look at the plugins real quick. So I think just looking through the plugins he has available lets you see like how powerful it is. So there's like a Prisma plugin. So this just lets you, it like integrates with Prisma. So you can just say, okay, for this GraphQL type, I want you to resolve it using my Prisma schema. And like, here's like the queries you need to do. Like the fields are still there, but see how this shows up. Like I can't do that in this code base here because we don't have the Prisma plugin, but if you plug it in, it'll show up. Yeah, like you can do like subqueries and everything here. So I think going through this list, there's a lot here. This is a little confusing. This is authorization, not authentication. So this lets you say
who can access what field.
Yeah, exactly. So this thing shows up here where you can say who can access this if you want to implement this at the API level.
I see.
I think we can do like demos and videos on like using all of these.
This is this will go into a type file, right? Or like the types folder, right? Like the article.py.
Yeah, exactly. You would define it right here. You would say, okay, only people that are admins can access, I don't know, the URL or something.
Right.
And so I think you can define it on the whole type. You can say the whole type is not accessible, or you can say just the field, etc. Let's just look at one more for completion. Relay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So this is the thing you were saying where if you use Cognito as auth, then we would need to say check which group is the user in, and put that into the context, and then check it over here, and then inside the validator.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, it's basically that. Like you can define all the, you can do this however you want. In this case, he's using a role system, and you can like get the context, and the context will contain the Cognito information, and then you can just set all these values.
Got it. Yeah.
This is also cool. Deferred scope.
What is that? Evaluate.
So instead of having to compute it all ahead of time, you can compute it lazily. So
I see.
maybe the query doesn't even hit this. So, and this is like a database call, so you can
Right.
do that efficiently.
I see.
Yeah, it's pretty well thought out. This is the last one I'll show. This one is pretty important. There's something in GraphQL called relay. It's really confusing because I think Facebook has named like 3 different things relay. But there's GraphQL, which is like a low-level spec. But then there's some patterns in it that is not in the low-level spec, but it's somewhat standardized. That there is like another spec that says, okay, when you're doing paging, anything that's pageable should be in the structure. So this adds a bunch of things to, if you want to like follow relay, which I think you should, it adds a bunch of things to make that easy. It's really tedious otherwise. So this helps you do things that are pageable.
Got it. Yeah.
I've used this once, I don't remember. Yeah, so you can like, there's like a bunch of helpers here to do that. But yeah, so I think this library will continue to grow, and this is the best place for plugins to happen because it's most tied in with how you're defining things. If you have stuff that's doesn't really care about the way you define it, like the Sentry plugin, for example, like you're just reporting errors to Sentry, that doesn't really need to be a Pothos plugin because you can add it globally to your whole API.
Hey Dax, Tyson on YouTube has a question.
Oh.
Does Pothos actually alter the schema or just do stuff in the resolver lifecycle?
Pothos defines the schema. So maybe he's asking about the plugins. I'm trying to think. So I'm only going based off the plugins I'm familiar with, and based on what they're doing, you can say, oh, okay, this has the ability to do that. Some of the plugins provide new methods here, like additional methods to the builder. So they'll provide like so like the Prisma plugin, for example, that's like a shorthand that'll end up generating this, but it's like a shorthand. So and then Pothos is just a way to define your schema. They have low-level tools to define the schema. They have higher-level tools to define the schema. And like some plugins help you define the schema in a simpler way. Some plugins like will augment your resolver function. Yeah.
All right. Yep.
Cool. So this file, again, like I'm separating this by like the domain. So everything article related will go here. So you define the article type, comment type, then you can define all the queries related to articles, all the mutations related to articles. You have arguments here, can resolve.
Yep.
Anything that's unclear here?
No, it looks pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. So the schema file, like as you add more stuff, you just need to make sure you import it. So I do more stuff. Pretty straightforward there.
Yep.
I think that's everything on the GraphQL side.
Yep.
At least the definition side. Now go to all the code gen stuff.
Yeah. Hey, I don't think I've seen the GraphQL.ts in the backend. In the backend functions. Okay, that's it. All right.
I just okay. Handler, yeah. There's a boilerplate. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Okay, now we have this GraphQL package. But what is this? This kind of contains some of the, like, we do need to do some code generation. And this contains the stuff that's related to it. The reason it's its own package is multiple things will need to import from here. So this is where all like the code generated stuff gets dumped into. And your front end is going to import from there because it needs the types to do all the stuff that I showed in the demo. But your backend will also import from there for your tests. Because if you want to write a test that's querying your GraphQL API, like you want it to be type safe and auto completed. I
remember before the front end type gen is written, we're writing into the front end folder. Now we're just keeping it inside GraphQL. Right?
Yeah, there's like a central place. So this code gen file, this needs to be hidden, obviously. So this is that thing that I built where we like analyze your your code, and then we like go through the code and extract out all the definitions, and at the end we generate a schema. So this will generate this, and then once we've generated this, there's a bunch of tools that can now ingest this and do the final step of code generating on the front end. So basically the pipeline is, we have Pothos. We need to generate this schema file, which is common. Then we need to generate TypeScript typings for anything consuming the API. There's two options there. There's Zeus, which is what I use in my demo, and there's GenQL. There's trade-offs with both. I think I'm leaning towards using GenQL going forward. I just used Zeus for the demo because I wanted to try it out. There's really nothing too important. This is all code gen that like no one should ever really be looking in here. If you look at
wait, in the previous demo, were we using GenQL before, or like?
I think the first demo time I showed this to you guys, I was using GenQL. Then I wanted to try out Zeus.
I see.
And then I'm not liking some of the stuff about it, so I'm going back to GenQL. But
sorry, go ahead, Zadax. Yeah.
I was gonna say it generates stuff like this. This is the stuff that powers like the autocomplete stuff.
Right. The schema.graphql is actually is it generated by Pothos? Is that what?
No, so this is generated by our thing, this cogen file.
I see. This
isn't a functionality that Pothos has to like statically analyze.
Yeah, talk about that again. So Pothos is you're taking the schema that it spits out, and then you're removing some things out of it. Is that what it was?
Yeah. So the issue here is, if we go to this schema, this is not just a schema definition. It's also the code to execute, like database calls, etc.
Resolve.
Yeah. So if we want to. If we're like, okay, but I want just the schema parts, like just give me the GraphQL schema definition, which is what this file is. To do that, we'd have to start up the server and then ask it what the schema is.
Ask Pothos?
No, so Pothos is done at this point. We're going to ask the GraphQL server. All GraphQL servers have the introspection ability to like spit out, okay, here's the schema that I'm running against, separate from the resolvers. It gives that back in like a JSON format, and from that you can render this. But because of the way like our workflow, like you shouldn't need to bring up the server to do anything. If you think about like SST deploy, we would have to like deploy it first, then query it, then code gen it, but then our front end is already deployed, right? So we have to be able to like get the schema without deploying anything or like bringing anything up. So that's what this code gen thing does. Like developers aren't going to have to be aware of this. Like this is just going to be something we're doing behind the scenes. It's going to have to improve over time. There's like, this works against everything I've used Pothos for so far, but people are going to find some things that break this, and they're easy to fix, but yeah. So this is like, the idea behind this is without running anything, it's just going to analyze your code and then figure out what the schema is.
Wait, Frank, I don't remember. Were you on that demo when Dax had talked about this?
I think I recall like everything he said, right?
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember like we'd gone over this, but this was like
I mentioned this before.
I don't remember if you were there.
Yeah. I guess let me repeat what Dax said. I guess right. If the normal way is we will rely on the querying the GraphQL server to do the introspect to figure out the schema and stuff, right? That we can turn that into the schema file pretty easily, right? But we want to do that statically without running anything.
Yeah, because the other issue is like sometimes you will try and bring it up, but it might error out because it's making some other calls.
Yeah, it's static. Which file is it statically generating based on? The types or?
It's well, I was going to show you. So let me see if I can. Okay, so here is what it generates. So it basically went through, it built this function basically the same way we would normally build a function, but it dropped anything that is not Pothos related. So if we just normally built a function, it would include that SQL file I showed you earlier. It would include that article file I showed you earlier.
Right.
It would include like the config loading, everything.
Yeah.
But it goes through and drops everything not Pothos related, and see, it drops all the resolve functions too.
Yeah.
So it tries to make something that's like executable no matter what. It doesn't depend on anything besides what's in this file. And then once you can run this file and get the schema out because it has no dependencies.
Like just straight up parsing this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this I'll actually show you in the code gen. So this, once it generates this, it's going to export the schema. This is that same like GraphQL schema thing, but there's like nothing runtime in it anymore.
Yeah.
And we just import this here, and then there's just like print schema function. This is what the server is doing under the hood anyway. Yeah. Like it'll take the GraphQL schema and get it as a string, and then we're going to write it to a file.
Got it. Yeah.
And right now I'm just hard coding like additional things to run after that. But I'll show you how this is going to fit into the stacks after. Make sense?
That's why you wrote our docs autogen pretty quickly, because you just wrote this.
It's actually the other way around. I was more confident because once we wrote the doc autogen, I was like, okay, I like understand that this is possible, and then
okay,
I was able to do this pretty quickly. The Pothos creator said that he'll take a PR for this and make it built into Pothos, but I want to like harden this a little bit more before we like suggest that it goes in that core.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, this is like the most confusing part about all this, but it's just for us internally to understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So this folder. So anyway, the concept of this folder, it'll contain the generated GraphQL schema if you want to just look at it, or if you want to use it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it'll contain Zeus right here, but it'll be GenQL stuff, so you can import both into your front end and your back end.
Right.
Make sense?
Yep. And the other stuff, that the autogen stuff, we're going to move into our package.
Yeah, this is going to move into our package.
Oh, this needs to be a workspace or like a package because of the import we need to do, right?
Yeah, so people can import it using this name.
/ Zeus / whatever. Right?
Yeah, exactly. They'll import, and I'll show you that in the front end. Okay, so let's go to the front end for now to complete it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Are we also importing? Are we importing this from the back end?
Just for tests.
Oh, right. Mention, yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise, I don't think your backend is going to need to query it, but I can see situations where people maybe want to do that. Right. Okay, so it's the thing I showed in my talk, this use type query thing here. This is the part that I'm maybe the most kind of iffy on. So this, I think, will become... So there's this file, it's like crazy file. We definitely don't want this to be in people's code bases. This should go into... I think we're just going to end up having an SST/React package. And we're going to provide these hooks. This will... Again, I have to see how to extract this into a package, but the idea here is it imports the types, and then it gives you a hook that like is fully typed. You don't really have to like no one has to understand this. It just gives you a type for function for query and function for mutation, and it'll give you a typed interface for it. But under the hood, it's just passing it to Urkel, which is the actual GraphQL client. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wait, why isn't this built into Urkel?
Because as the thing I was saying the other day, like, I think these projects just need to copy each other. Urkel is pretty agnostic to how you're going to pass in the query. So they support a few different things. String, a document node, and a type document node. Type document node is kind of the thing going forward. It's hard to explain exactly what it is, but that's just like the way to do this all in a type safe way. But yeah, like this use query is coming from Urkel. Like they don't support like a native integration with like getting full type safety here. I think each of these packages are like slightly too small. Like we're using Zeus, but if we use GenQL, neither of these are full featured GraphQL clients. You have to use them with another GraphQL client. So if they were like a really great full featured GraphQL client, we would just be using that instead of also using Urkel. And if Urkel had full type safety and like really was built around that idea, we would just be using Urkel. So there's like a kind of awkward thing where we need to build some glue between these two things that both give important features. And this is like that glue.
It feels this glue thing can be abstracted out, and then we would just use our own kind of GraphQL client, right? I mean, we don't have to do it now, but just thinking.
Yeah, I think we kind of have to see how this stuff evolves a little bit and see where we want to intervene. Yeah. So the only issue with this now is this is the only part so far that's very coupled to React. If you want to use it in somewhere else, you're gonna have to figure out how to do this yourself. We can, if people ask for it, like I can do it for them. I'm just not an expert in other frameworks. But I had this for React. I had it for Solid, but
right. But is there a version of this where like maybe there isn't, because it's just like that like you can, you know, the sort of React package can use like the core thing, but it doesn't seem like it. Like this thing seems relatively straightforward and specific to React.
it's pretty small. You're gonna have to write like for each framework like a file of this size. And most of the code is like just following the right patterns in your framework.
Yeah.
And Urkel has integrations for most frameworks, so it's really just like defining these types, which is like we can just do over time. We can just add more frameworks. But
is there something for on the Urkel side where we can have like do they have plugins, like, you know, because it weird, right?
So sort of not exactly a plugin, but so let's say we were just using we weren't using our stuff. Let's say we're just using
Urkel
core. Yeah, and you're just using it's just from Urkel, not Urkel core. Use query. So let's say we were just using that, and you're here to define your query. Obviously, this won't be type safe or anything because you can pass in a string, whatever. We could maybe provide another way to do this is not to wrap the whole hook and do something like typed query here. And this would be a little more neutral because this would just spit out a like a string, but it would still be typed in a way that Urkel understands.
It kind of like just converts like JSON to our type, right?
Yeah, which is Zeus. That's the reason why I was initially trying to use Zeus, because it has a way to just generate that automatically. The Zeus TD. Honestly, we don't actually have to do anything if we just expose it. Like you can do this today, and this will just work. So this will work. It's just a little bit uglier because like you're calling this other thing, and
you're the importer types, right? Or the Zeus types.
Yeah, you have to import this. This is going to be the issue with this, and it's going to be too hard to explain, but I'll just like take it as a fact. But there's There's an issue with mutations, though. You can't really do this with mutations because I don't really know how to explain it. There's just not a way to do what I just showed you with queries to also do the mutations. There's like not like a way to do that because mutations have dynamic variables you pass in, and because of that, you can't. It like needs a very specific API, and Urkel wasn't built in mind. Like I said, Urkel wasn't built in mind to optimize for this type safety thing, so their API is expecting something different. And to do it, it gets like really, really messy.
I see.
So that's why I decided to wrap both of these, give you like just like what I think is the best way to do both queries and mutations.
By us wrapping it, is it type safe now or?
Yeah.
Okay.
By us wrapping it, you get the full type safety. You can do it for both queries and you can do it for mutations as well. It's particularly useful in mutations because I don't know if you remember back when we were writing the operation files, we had to like write the mutation, write the variables the mutation took, then pass those variables into the actual mutation. There's a lot of code duplication. It just felt like a lot of duplication. This just like nicely removes that. So I think this is probably what I think we should go with for now. But yeah, like we are getting into an area where we're saying you have to be using React to get everything working out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, I think for now it's fine. Yeah. It's definitely an area of concern. Yeah.
Yeah, the guild people are working on a competitor to both Zeus and GenQL. And they actually they're pretty public about it. They have like a Notion doc where it shows exactly how it'll work, where they're progressed to, like what they're blocked by. I imagine once that comes out, it'll kind of just be the thing everyone uses. Because like everyone uses all their stuff otherwise. So I think when that comes out, we can kind of rethink how we're doing all of this.
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions on the front end now besides that?
No.
Yeah, so the key thing that's different here is you're not writing the operation files anymore. You can just tweak everything inside your component.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, then the last thing is the stack stuff. So this is the thing I brought the other day. So for now, I am using GraphQL API, but I think it's going to move to being like a function you pass into like another construct you can attach into the normal API. But let's talk about what we need to do here for the Pothos integration. So we're going to have to add another thing here, which I think not exactly here, but in this new GraphQL construct, we'll have a thing called Pothos. We'll need a path to your schema. So in this case, it would be function GraphQL, that schema.ts file. This is what we'll run the static analysis against. We'll need an output. This should be optional. We'll default it to GraphQL/GraphQL schema. And then we'll need like hooks or like commands, something to. This is an array. So it'll run like GenQL, GraphQL schema, and output to GraphQL, GenQL, something like that. There's a bunch of code generation tools, like whatever else you want to add in here, you can add. So the idea here is during local development, whenever we detect a change to this schema, not just the schema, but we're gonna do that same thing where we like track all the dependencies, any file that contributes to this. We're gonna rerun our code gen. We're gonna output it here, and then we're gonna run all of the commands. So in local development, this is probably the minimal, or this is probably the minimal thing that'll come in the boilerplate. Everything should just work. Anytime you make a change, you flip to your front end file. It's going to be fast enough where it feels instant. And then for deploying, we're going to do the same thing and just run each of these once, so that anything downstream like also works. Does that make sense?
I guess why couldn't we use the code gen prop, right?
Yeah, so this was before. So this is built around a very specific tool, the GraphQL CodeGen tool.
I see.
That actually now ends up just being a step here. If you're using GraphQL CodeGen, that'll run against same schema that we outputted. The reason what we were doing before is before GraphQL CodeGen could just watch everything and do everything for us. But GraphQL CodeGen has no idea how to like monitor this and like extract the schema. So we need to be responsible for that, monitoring the thing, extracting the schema. Then we can trigger any other steps downstream. So if you are using GraphQL CodeGen, you can just put that as a step here.
Or I was thinking if we could make, say, the GraphQL CodeGen, the CodeGen prop, you could take one command like what we did before. You take an array of commands and say we wrap schema output and actual commands into like a serverless SST/Pathos package, and that package say have like a binary in there that pretty much just runs pretty much the code gen. You will look like, see, you import from SST/Pathos, and then the command is called like gen, and then you just call gen -- schema equals to function GraphQL schema.ts -- output equal to that, and what else are we missing? The other something else like GraphQL/GenQL. So pretty much we don't need a Pathos. So we wrap this whole thing inside as like one code gen command. I'm just, does that make sense?
So what would this look like? So this would point to your schema.
Yeah, code gen. Let's say the code gen could be an array of commands, and the command would be, let me write it out and see if that makes sense. Say you import this, and then
Where this would be in the CDK code, in the stacks code.
yeah, and let me maybe we might not need the import, but let me see. Does that make sense? As seen, I think I was thinking if I
So
could be by I could be sorry, yeah.
I would say that can work where this is just a list of commands to run whenever the
Mhm.
file changes,
Yeah.
but you would have to run that first before you run anything else.
What do you mean like uh the this exact command that I'm
Yeah, like so let's say you run that and now I want to generate GenQL. How do I do that? It would be another command in the list, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you have to run the SST one first
Mm-hmm.
before running anything else because ST1 generates a GraphQL.schema file and everything needs that.
Right.
So that's more or less, I think, what I have here, where we run that command, or not the command, but we like run that process first before we run
Or any
all
of
of the
these
stuff we want
commands,
to do.
right? I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Separately, I also want to try to anywhere where we don't need to spawn a node process, I want to like try to limit that because I think, especially with the VS Code stuff, anytime you spawn anything, it like the debugger attaches, and that's kind of what blows up the memory. That's why I was looking to see that example that I found yesterday where the guy was using CDK without spawning stuff. Yeah, I think that the more we can the less we can have to escape to that, the better. Even this GenQL thing, it's written really well in that you can use it as a library. So you can, it has some kind of like it's something like this, and you can import it from, I don't have it here, but it's something like GenQL CLI, and you can just call it. So I would prefer to do that, but there's not really a way to make, like it doesn't fit into this framework well. So we'll have to spawn it for GenQL, but.
Right. Wait, we are using GenQL right now, right? For the front end stuff.
Yeah, the plan is to use GenQL. Like I said in the talk, I use Zeus, but in the process of trying it out for the talk, I feel better with GenQL.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I guess one thing I didn't quite catch was I think wasn't clear is you're thinking about making another construct for GraphQL, not GraphQL API, call it like GraphQL API route or something, right? And
yeah, I kind of have this in my other project. Let me. Oh. So in here, I didn't use the GraphQL construct. I just used the API construct. And I just did this. I just post, send it to the GraphQL handler. So I'm wondering if this, and I think if this whole thing, I don't know exactly how we should do it because one idea was we have this type thing here, right? So what if we said this was type GraphQL, and then you can just specify all the stuff for the function and also the pop this stuff here. That's one option. But the downside of this option is then GraphQL isn't like this discrete construct, and it just doesn't fit nicely into our docs and everything. If we want to have a nice dedicated page for it. The other idea was something like this GraphQL function. And this is and then you would have it like this. And this was just extend function or something, or embed function, or I don't know, something like that. It would extend this function probably. And you can specify all the normal stuff, but then you also get the options here.
Sorry.
Jay, can't hear you.
That's fine.
What's the downside with having just a construct? What was Why?
Yeah, so
don't
the thing with the full construct is you can do that, but let me go back to this is using a full construct. We'll probably put this under a custom domain called API whatever. As soon as you need like non-GraphQL stuff, like if you need like a REST endpoint, or if you want to proxy something, or any of the other functionalities that API has, you need to make a separate API. So now you have two APIs in your infrastructure. So to me, it feels cleaner to have a single API where some routes handle GraphQL, some routes can handle REST, some routes can proxy to another service. That feels a little more powerful to me than having to make a standalone GraphQL API that is like just more limited.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
We could technically add routes to this, but again,
Yeah.
that would be then Y2
Just getting the same thing. Yeah. I think there's a good point here. I think overall, sort of design wise, of like, I guess this is maybe where we want to go, right? Where
you just have an API, you don't, right?
Exactly. Like GraphQL isn't like a separate idea.
Yeah, especially if we're like going the direction of, okay, you turn on one field and now it's like deployed regionally. Like that's an API functionality. That's not a GraphQL functionality. Like everything that is using the API should just automatically get that.
Does that apply to WebSocket as well? If
I don't know how the WebSocket one works, but potentially if we could implement it that way.
Because that is kind of like AppSync, where they technically give you two endpoint, right? The HTTPS and then WSS.
Well, that's a protocol, but the URL could be the same. Like when I've deployed WebSocket stuff before, it's been a single API, just another path like /socket.
Right.
But how does the WebSocket API work? Is that a
that is a dedicated? It's a different service. I mean,
okay,
that's different.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to do this for that, right?
How does that integration with IoT work?
Yeah, IoT is a dedicated, like a separate URL as well.
See.
Yeah, the IoT one is going to be a little weird because for some reason they give you one IoT URL per account, like per AWS account. You can't make multiple IoT pub sub things.
I see.
So technically, if you have like 5 stages deployed to the same account in your dev account, you could subscribe to like events across every single stage. So we need to like bake in the idea of stages into like so IoT. The message has like a type, and you can specify a prefix, and you subscribe everything under the prefix. So stage has to be the first part of that, and maybe even app. But it's going to figure it out later.
Yeah, what do you guys think? I like the idea of getting rid of I like the idea of getting rid of the GraphQL API. I mean, well, we can leave it there, or like deprecate it, but merging everything into, if you merge into API, that's what we were talking about before we got here, Jay. Do we make a GraphQL function? If you
So the options are, I think actually people prefer putting it not at the root, but the options are type GraphQL, define the function and like normally, and then you can define code gen stuff here.
Damn, I like the type GraphQL. It follows our
yeah.
It follows our
The only downside is this maybe shouldn't impact API design, but how do we document this? Like, is it just going to be part of our API docs, or should GraphQL get its own section?
I think our API doc will be about GraphQL, and then there'll be a section of how do you add like RESTful routes.
I see.
I was just thinking, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the one option, and the other option is
Does the type being GraphQL make sense, or is the type being like Pothos? Does that make sense?
that's a good question because this code gen is Pothos specific.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah. Let's see what other.
Maybe this might even be.
I don't know. I thought you don't like classes, man. That's why we moved towards this type idea. You asking me to move back?
I mean, I also prefer this because this is like it fits in with everything else. We can keep expanding this with like cooler things like I mean, it sounds like we can't do this, but if we could, I mean, we could do this using the proxies, but we could have like type WebSocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that,
Yeah.
it feels like a good thing to build off of.
Does the third route do anything the second route cannot do? I guess no.
No,
But
it's. I mean, the only benefit is this becomes its own construct and treat it like a
yeah,
thing. But
I prefer the second route. I think that when I was writing the docs, I feel like the lesser number of construct, the better. It'd be better if you just have one API construct, one auth that handles everything. One DB you can use in the DynamoDB mode, or but that might be too much. Another thing, another option. Yeah, sorry, Dax. Yeah.
No, I was just agreeing.
Another option could be, does it make sense if you change the keyword post to Pothos / GraphQL? No, right? That's like
Yeah, because I think people this is like they can do this if they want as well. They want to like make it a get request. So yeah, I think we should keep that the same. Yeah, I do wonder though if this type should be GraphQL or Pothos.
Yeah, if it's Pothos, then I think we don't need to name the field Pothos. We can just flatten it to be like output schema and comment.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, schema. Right, and then like whatever we call this. Yeah, that's a good point. One slight annoying thing about this though is I found the autocomplete on this not to be great, but maybe
yes.
Actually, no, never mind. I think it's okay.
I mean, it's okay if you always remember to do type first. If you don't do type, sometimes it tell you some really weird messages. Yeah.
Okay.
Can TypeScript possibly do this? Like the first thing you define has to be type, has to be the discriminator before.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of I'm a little confused because I'm confused why it would even suggest these because do these apply to every single thing no matter what?
No, you can't function doesn't. Yeah, function URL.
Yeah, so I'm kind of confused why it even shows this. Like my understanding of it was when you have a union with a discriminator, or no, when you have a union, TypeScript can only show the common fields.
Maybe type is optional in one of them. I'm not sure if.
Oh yeah, maybe
if type is.
It's optional on the function one, yeah. Okay, I mean that's minor, but yeah, okay. I like this. I like having this being Pothos. I like think of another thing we could imagine using this for in the future. I don't know if we would actually do this, but like I don't know. This probably doesn't make any sense, but sometimes there's like popular services that you expose endpoints for, like a Stripe hook. Then you would have like a function that or something. That maybe is too far. Oh, you know what another example is, like a
Yeah. Damn. I
maybe
think
OAuth.
we're onto something. Yeah. OAuth. I remember Ash was trying to implement some authorizer stuff, and he had to implement the API backend for.
Yeah, you're talking about the well-known thing, well-known JWKS.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
He ran into that bug. Yeah. So yeah, this to me, I think has some potential to build on. But yeah,
Like for like a Slack, right? If you do type Slack, we could even make it such that you don't need anything. You don't need code. We could have some
implement the function for you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so if we went down this road, what is, like, let's say, like, take the type auth or type Pothos, like, what is that thing? That's a route?
It's a route.
It's a type of a route.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a type of, they call it API integration, like a destination of, it could be a type redirect, it could be a type.
Oh, redirect is a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now we have 3. It can be a function, it can be ALB or URL.
It's a type of an integration. I think that makes more sense to me, because when I think of it as like it's a type of a route, that's weird. That doesn't make sense. Right? Like,
yeah, it's more like, what are you mounting at
type of a route is like, okay, it's like a post, get, like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that have to do with, right, OAuth or like Pothos, right? That doesn't actually make any sense. But integration makes sense to me.
Yeah, because before I was approaching things like Twilio, MailChimp as a construct, where I mean, you will still need to be so the construct's job is so that you could create a new Twilio number or new Netlify site when you deploy, but it doesn't interact with it. I think this is on the interaction side where you could like,
yeah, which is why, like, there's a part of me that feels it would be better if it was a class.
What? Why? I mean, there's no difference, right? The class, and maybe you're not very comfortable with TypeScript, but
no, but if it doesn't, it feels more loose, like when it's just a type. It's just, this is completely like it's synthetic in that, like, it's because there is something about like what Dax was saying of like, if this was a class, then you can kind of be like, okay, I've got our API construct, and then I have a bunch of these other things that I could like plug into the API construct. And as a class, it just it makes a bit more sense to me.
I guess the way I would think about it is, I think it makes more sense to make it a class if it can be used in more than one place. Because if it's a standalone thing, like it's a class, a standalone, but you can only ever use it with API.
Yeah. It is true that I think like it does. So this way it feels more lightweight, right? Like just doing it as a type like feels like far more lightweight.
Yeah,
just something was just weird. Like when I was reading it as like, okay, see, just like reading that line of code, right? It's like post / GraphQL. It's like type Pothos or whatever. I think it's a type of a route.
It's like, what is mounted at this route? It's kind of.
Yeah, yeah. Right now we don't
Interesting.
have the idea of class. We don't have any class in our system. Um,
You mean like within a construct,
yeah, we
right?
just
Because
don't have
constructs are
class. Yeah. We just have construct.
right, right.
Uh, yeah. I I don't know if this is a concern where I think construct isn't like an intuitive term to people. And if we introduce a concept of a construct and then also a class, right? That just brings confusion, right? And I'd rather call it something like blocks or or something. And we have our API blocks, this block, that block, and then you can also have this route route block. Because it's kind of wrong to call these things a construct because they are not a construct. They are actually just a class. Um,
Yeah, I think of them as like handlers or something.
yeah.
Wait a minute, Frank. What was the thing that you had always wanted to do with like with the function handlers? Like you wanted to do
Uses.
function wrapper.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what it
Yeah.
was called. Right. So this is effectively that.
Like I think function wrapper is our very initial idea, and then we realized it's a bad idea. We shouldn't do magic like wrapping. We should just provide them packages. They can just import themselves in the kind of like what Dax is doing with the GraphQL handler, right? That's a better, lesser magic way. Uh,
But this one is this is effectively like, especially the one that you said, which was the one, was the Slack one you said, where like the
right.
code is provided,
Yeah.
right? That is getting pretty interesting because when you're saying code is provided, that's a bit, it's a bit of a construct. It's creating like actual infrastructure, kind of, right? Like
It's still
it's
a
like,
class. Itself isn't. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
so that's what's weird, right? Like, so I do feel like,
Actually, this is not even a class. This is just like a struct. Okay, I'm just naming job terms I read from
block, struct,
this
def,
like a
Let
nightmare
me
reading
give one more
C++.
example
enum.
that
Mhm.
maybe is helpful. At some point, if we decide that okay, we're going to provide our own auth library, or we're going to like use one of these existing auth libraries instead of recommend incognito, we might end up having something like this. I don't know, because a lot of these libraries need
Callbacks.
like callback URLs. So we might like we might have like GitHub and then specify like whatever stuff goes here. And this would be like a nice way to add GitHub auth to your thing, or any kind of OAuth, whatever. Stuff that's really boilerplatey, I think is a good candidate to make it like a type of handler.
Yeah. So I think the issue I have with this one is that with the normal API routes, I as a user, I am supplying the handler. With some of these, like SST has a built-in handler.
I think that's already not the case for this one. But this is like, we already provide a proxy feature where you don't really specify the handler, the URL, and where to forward to.
Well, yeah, right. So I think that one's a bit more intuitive in that like it's sort of a pass through type thing.
Mhm.
Like, like SSD isn't actually doing quote unquote work, I guess. But so okay, let's take it to an extreme, right? So let's say you had like the GraphQL or like an auth one, and they were like, I'm just gonna make it up. They're like 20 different handlers that we're supplying,
Mm.
right? And it's like a very complicated like thing, and we're doing like a bunch of stuff for you. That is so far removed from like me defining a route in one line. Remember, like, so okay, I think Dax had like brought this up. I think when he had first seen SST, he saw the API construct and the routes, and he was like, "Oh, the routes look so clean." I think at least if I'm remembering it right, like that's kind of the story that like you told
Yeah,
me
I
at some
do.
point, I think,
Yeah,
right?
it was like a lot clearer than implementing like 10 lines of stuff.
Right, and it's like going from that to this, like this feels a lot more magic to me, which again, like totally fine. Like I'm not against the idea of like SSD handling a bunch of like the odd stuff with the callbacks. It's just those things don't feel the same to me. Like on one side, like okay, here's a route, right? Here's the handler for it. Proxy, sure, like it's a bit different. But the further and further you get away from like SSD doing a bunch of stuff behind the scenes for me for a specific like integration, I want it to be called a different thing at that point.
Right. So do you think it would? I think the other alternative is having separate constructs that take your API as an argument. Um, take the API as an argument and like the other configurations output.
Okay, wait, actually, sorry. Let me put this one differently. I think my problem is that it's sitting inside the routes prop where like let's do the auth one, right? Okay, it's like slash whatever slash GitHub or something, right? Like, but it has this other callback URL that you're putting in, but that's not defined under that route. Or again, like I'm maybe I'm going like hypotheticals here, but it's like, you guys see what I'm saying there? It's like
No,
in my mind there was like a one-to-one mapping between the route and a handler. Now it's like there is the route, but it could be doing multiple things.
I mean, so your problem is with proxy, not with other stuff, right?
No, I think the callback one is probably a good example of this one, right? Like where
But
you're implementing something separately. Let's put an example down. Let's put the
yeah, I mean, yeah, this example, if you didn't put proxy plus, which that allow you to take multiple
sure,
routes,
yeah,
if you just did slash auth slash
right,
callback, you're fine with
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, right. So that like if it's like a one-to-one thing, that's fine. I guess I was going to the really extreme example where like you're implementing a bunch of different handlers for,
Yeah, which we
and
probably will want to. Yeah.
if we go that far, then it gets a bit weird because like in my mind,
No,
the route thing is like a table.
no, it is still one handler. It's just that handler is handling stuff from a bunch of URLs. Like for example, right? You have one route handling slash
Sorry, yeah,
node slash right.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, say that again. Yeah. Um,
It
so it would
like
most likely be like any proxy
yeah,
type case. Hmm.
right. You have one handler handling slash node slash $ID, and in that sense, you're not thinking that this is handling a bunch of things. This is just handling one thing, which is fetching a single node. Um, over here, it's like doesn't matter what type it is. You're still creating one handler or one integration, right? Is that it
Yeah.
could be, and that's like a single purpose lambda, or it could be in the auth and GraphQL case that's multi-purpose or like a fat lambda.
Yeah, and so the original discussion for this one was that it's likely that you'll do the slash GraphQL and you'll have other routes on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one makes sense to me. I think that one's fine. Um, yeah, it's just the more we do behind the scenes, the more explicit I'd want it to be, right? Like avoiding the magic thing.
Well, I
When I
think
say
that
explicit, it's like being clear, like, okay, this thing does a bunch of different things.
well, I mean, like, are we still trying to evaluate this versus a class, or RJ, are you saying something different? Are you saying this and class is the
No,
same thing?
I'm not doing like versus a class. I'm just saying this one doesn't feel right to me. Like if you're doing a bunch of different things like in a single route definition, it does feel a bit weird. Now, I think when you do the any and the proxy, it's like you're opening the door to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I see the point that like even currently you could kind of do that, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
proxy approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just with the proxy approach, it's still like user defined, not SST defined,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think my problem is when we start doing stuff behind the scenes that feels more than just a route. It feels like an integration, and it would be better if it was named as such. But I don't know. Like what if there was like an integrations prop? I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I think for things that should not be configurable, like the route is extremely opinionated. I think that like .well known thing that we saw some people using, that's like very opinionated. There's like very specific routes that your API needs to support. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to let people just mount that at any place. So I think these are for the way I view this is for stuff where it's just a handler. It's a handler that contains some functionality and you can mount it anywhere you want.
Wherever you want. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas if we're mounting stuff for you, probably shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
in the routes block. But again, this is a future concern. I don't think it's not specific to this one right now. But like
Yeah. But I can see the argument for maybe for auth that's like its own construct, and you pass in the API and it'll add a bunch of routes for you.
yeah, I like
I
that
don't know if that's
too.
more clear.
For the auth specific one, I like that because it's like when you just like think about the concepts, like I'm adding auth to API.
Yeah, the TRPC one's another example that I think fits this because that's just a single. We'll just have a handler, and that's just a single route. You can put it anywhere you want.
Yeah, I think I like that guideline. If you're gonna control where you're gonna put it, then it sits in the routes. Whereas if we're gonna do it for you, it probably shouldn't sit in the routes.
Okay. So for the GraphQL stuff, we're going to go with this, and we'll kind of consolidate the GraphQL docs into the API.
Yeah. Do we want to make that call the type function hyphen pothos? I mean, just kind of relate to this point of user knowing what this is about. Uh,
Yeah,
Well,
what is this?
this
I think this
this
goes
will
back to that,
require a
right?
function, though, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's not a type of a function. It's a type of a integration, I guess, or like whatever we want to call it.
Right.
yeah. Okay.
We'll have
And
that,
in our docs, it's like, yeah,
schema, and then hooks, whatever.
right.
Yeah. Dak's point was that, right, without having a class, is it something we could be put it out like front and center? So we have.
We have a bunch of these.
Well, it's hard to really highlight, like with the mental model of our constructs and our docs, it's hard to really highlight that, oh, we definitely support GraphQL in like a very big way.
Mm-mm.
So that's just something to think about. Because if you look through our constructs, it'll just say API, and you might not think that, oh, API means GraphQL.
Yeah, but I know what Frank is heading towards here. It's this, which is I think the place that we want to go to. It's that, and I kind of go back to this one. It's like I prefer the name Ideal Stack because from everything that we've sort of researched and the setup that we've come up with, GraphQL is the better way to do an API at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
we're setting up in a way where the best way should be GraphQL plus REST.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, plus REST.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so our docs and the quick start is basically just like creating a GraphQL API.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you wouldn't enter into our stuff through our construct docs. You would enter through the quick start, and there's a bunch of stuff you would see before you even get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And our API up top, like we're calling it an API, but we're basically saying, like it's optimized to, yeah, maybe the wording is sort of like workshop, but it's GraphQL first. That's basically the point. And then once we do RPC stuff, it's like, oh, you can, it has the same notion, which is it is a type safe API.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like good front end integration for it.
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to do is on our doc, we just have one API in the section. I will want to move GraphQL, maybe even AppSync to same spot as API Gateway v1 API. Yeah. Okay.
Nice. Okay.
Nice.
Hey, wait a minute. Alan is in here.
Oh, he was in here.
Oh, he was. Yeah, it's like 17 minutes ago. Jeez, we've been talking for way too long.
No, this is the biggest question mark on our thing. I'm glad we're checking this off.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be nice. I guess the one other thing that this model affects is the console. GraphQL. Does like the layout of the console still make sense? Where GraphQL is its own thing, you should be able to flip between the various GraphQL routes you have. Most people only have one. That makes sense. Right?
Yeah, some routes will be GraphQL, some routes.
Yeah, but the GraphQL Explorer will just show up if you have any routes that are GraphQL, and the normal API Explorer will just be the normal one.
And do we need a column for all the endpoints? Kind of like the API Explorer. In the GraphQL Explorer, if you go in, do we have a column for all the routes that are GraphQL?
We have the switcher already, so we can use that. Right now, it's between multiple GraphQL APIs, but
yeah,
you can switch between the routes. Yeah, I feel like most people only have one, so there's no reason to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. I think once we find like a better alternative to the playground, we could maybe redesign that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is everything. We went through pretty much every single file in here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna start with the construct stuff, getting the code gen working and like this new API.
See, what question marks do we have? Yeah. Do we want to put in some sort of auth before our launch?
Yeah, so I was doing some research this morning. So the only thing that I can find, there's two options. There's Next.js auth, and there's Passport Next.js. I was looking into Next.js to see how coupled to Next.js it was. It feels pretty coupled. I don't know if I really like it. Passport has like 500 things it supports, but you can tell it's like really old. Like everything's still using callback patterns, and this doesn't feel like the right thing either. Then there's GraphQL Envelope. This is the one I thought the least about. So they have this like use Auth0 plugin, and it'll like append to the context, so you can have access to this. I think this is a good option compared to the other two, but
But
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
like not
this
really sure.
how does this one solve the Cognito problem? This
This
specific
won't
one?
use Cognito at all.
Right, but now we have to pick this and a provider like Auth0, right? Or are you saying
Yeah,
this one? Do they
this one
have
is
some
like
like?
the number of providers they have here is smaller than other stuff.
I think if we scroll down, I think this says it has like an interface that could do hook into like a generic.
Yeah, I think my thought was, okay, we should include it if it's an out of the box experience. If you have to also go sign up for Auth0 or something else, that to me doesn't feel like an out of the box experience, even though that's something a lot of people will do. It just doesn't. I feel like it doesn't make sense to be in our template. So for me, the ideal situation. I also talked to Brandon from Bliss.js today. So they're working on it's basically, I mean, Passport, I think, is for something in your application. Conceptually, like this makes sense. It feels a little outdated, but they're working on basically a new version of that where it's not framework specific. It's just a way to drop in auth that'll behave consistently no matter what provider you're using. You can switch between whatever providers you want. I
Right,
think
right.
something like that is what I would like. But yeah, there's just another area I've been kind of confused about because every service I've tried has been kind of limited when I don't have the users in my own system.
Yeah, so the thing I want is just like a self-hosted service.
Yeah, I mean that's another option where we build our own thing that is really focused on. It's just like in DynamoDB, and it's all in your account.
Yeah.
And as long as we don't change like the sort key for the password and stuff, uh, like these, we could swap to using a different provider at different times, right? Like at
Wait,
later
what do you
point.
mean?
If it's passwordless, yeah.
Even if it is, even if it comes with password, but we keep the sorting algorithm the same and same sorting key, that we don't need to migrate the users, right? You should be.
Well, hang on. So let me. If we have, let's just use a Bliss.js example. They're going to have an auth library.
Mhm.
It's probably just going to have a bunch of consistent
Yep.
APIs no matter what is powering the auth under the hood. So like a get session, a get user, a log out. It's very consistent functions you can call no matter what you're doing under the hood. We can write an integration for that stores it in DynamoDB. That's
Right.
that's the integration. You can use that, or you can use I'm assuming they're going to have stuff for Google, Facebook,
Auth0, right.
yeah, whatever. You can switch, but your code isn't really going to have to change. But
Sorry, wait. When you do Google, Facebook, though, where is the storage for the actual
it's on. It's
users?
not. It's. I don't think that anything's gonna be stored in your system because at that point
Okay.
you're saying I don't want a self-hosted one. I'm going to use someone else's auth service, but I still want a consistent API.
Right, but interesting. But that is different from.
Hmm.
Anyway, this may be getting into the weeds a bit. Okay, yeah, anyway, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, that is different from Cognito. And Cognito
Yeah,
is
right,
like
right.
a single managed service that you can configure to use different things.
Right, which is what I think Auth0 also is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
Auth0 is that, but you can also use it to just store
Mm.
your users there.
Right, right.
Um,
Anyway,
yeah.
continue. Yeah. So you were saying, right? So that would be the pattern.
I think that's what, because I want to give people the option of not using an external service. Period. Like it
Right.
just goes in their system.
yeah,
But I
Right. Right.
don't
Okay.
want that to be like a very specific API that now people that are using GitHub login, it's like a completely different library.
Yeah. Well. Let me. I don't know, Frank. It sounds like you want to say something, but after you say this, let me try and lay this one out, and then we can
yeah.
talk about it.
I think I would prefer something like Passport, even though it's kind of old. I feel it might take some time for these like auth libraries to mature and handle cases. Um, I always feel the AWS services are so complex to use for good reason because they actually handle all the cases to stuff everything in there. I think if we right if I think if we try to right these third-party libraries like auth libraries, right, if they start adding features, right, the destination would be kind of a cognito-ish setup, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys see what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait. Let me see if I can lay this one out. Okay. So the user is coming in. Uh, they're gonna log in with whatever auth provider you put in, or your own auth provider, right? Like you're storing it yourself. The code that the developer is using in the case of Passport is like a consistent interface, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't need a passport. You can just be like go implement each auth provider like yourself, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of people have that, right? What we're saying on some level is Cognito is not great. At least this is what I would want is like a self-hosted auth provider, serverless auth provider, right? But that is still kind of independent of something like Passport or like the Bliss.js one that Dax is sort of saying. But now we have to make like two choices. It's like, A, do we want to do our own? B, do you want people um, to go through something like Passport? Because if let's say like there was like an amazing Passport version, let's just assume Passport was amazing, right?
Mhm.
And it was like well understood, then almost everybody's implementing Passport in their application, regardless of the auth provider that they use, regardless of
Mhm.
whether we implement our own auth provider, right? But Passport isn't that great. So now it's like we have to kind of make a choice on that, which is like as a developer, I have to now use Passport plus use the auth provider that we have that we like roll out. So I don't know, like it's like now we're going from one problem to two problems, and that's okay. You see what I'm saying, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So just to like define things a little bit more, when we say our own auth provider, we're just saying a way to store users in Dynamo or something.
yeah, yeah,
And that,
on your side, right?
yeah, exactly. And that might just be a library. Where we're
Yeah,
saying, okay, should that just be some random thing we make, or should it conform to something like Passport
Passport,
because
right?
Passport is well understood and it's like,
Yeah,
somewhat
yeah.
of a standard.
That would be a much easier call to make if Passport was like
Yeah.
great and widely used.
So it is widely used, and the thing on my screen right now, the this
Right,
Bedrock
right.
thing, they
Oh, he used their Passport.
yeah, it's funny because if I'm looking through this list now, and like you can kind of break our stuff into the same way. We use TypeScript, we use Kaisley instead of Prisma. We're using like a different code gen thing than this. Instead of Nexus, we're using Pathos. We're using Urkel. Maybe we use Passport. The rest of the stuff is a little bit out of scope, or I guess prettier in ESLint. Yeah, we can spend more time with Passport and see if my initial take on it is not correct, because I haven't like really done a lot with it. I've just kind of looked at the docs. But I think I do feel like the Blitz thing, I think they're just looking at Passport and being like, this just needs like a modern take, but it should more or less fit in the same way. So that's like, I don't know, that I mean, that's not like going to happen immediately, but
yeah, I guess to look into like the usefulness of something like Passport, though. Does it, like, why would I use Passport? Is it because that I might potentially switch auth providers at some point?
I guess it's less about,
like, if I was using Auth0, I'd just like straight use Auth0, right? Or assuming Auth0's clients are great.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to whether it's a managed service or a library. If you want a managed service, you want to go click into a UI and configure your auth and get all the other benefits of a managed service, you're going to use Auth0. But sometimes libraries can replicate some of what a managed service can do, obviously with some additional burden. So I don't think it's about switching. Like realistically, you're not really going to switch. You might use multiple, but yeah, I think it's just more just it being in the form of a library instead of an API. And I think most cases I prefer the managed service. I haven't liked my experience with, I've used Auth0, I've used Cognito. There's another one called Userfront, which has been a little bit better, but yeah, I don't know. It's always felt kind of awkward. It's never felt like, oh, I love this. This is what I'm always going to use. So I'm wondering if like as a managed service, auth is just kind of going to be awkward always.
Yeah, and the line of thinking for us is more like, oh, it's just self-hosted, right? It's basically a managed service, but it's like self-hosted.
Yeah, it's all serverless, so it's not really as self-hosted.
Self-hosted would require, right, having like a DynamoDB add a couple routes.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. If you implement OAuth, that would,
Yeah. No, it's yeah. I'm just like thinking it through. I'm not saying that we should do it. It's just like it is quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
But I guess just in my mind is that like is the ideal scenario here somebody implementing something like that, like a self-hosted serverless auth with just like a great client, a great set of clients, right, for your server, and is that the end state, or is it that like something that plugs into like a great Passport type library?
Actually, I take what I said back. I thought Passport also provide like a user database, but it seemed
I thought it did. I thought one of these strategies would just store it locally, but maybe it doesn't. There's just one other thing.
By the way, I don't actually know. I just assume Passport is just like the thing that sits in front.
This is another thing that exists.
But they're Java.
They're Java? What?
Yeah, I think these are the people that are Java. Like we looked into this. Like the other day, you were sending it to me. I think I went to their README. Yeah, they are. I see them. If you go to their README, I think it's like if you want to host this, which it is a self-hosted thing, there's literally a thing that says why Java. Right? See that? Table of contents.
I see. Okay, so this would like need to run in a container and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
This doesn't work for us. Yeah. I guess there's this I think a little bit of a nuance where there's auth and there's storing of users.
Right. Yep.
And I feel like it's awkward when the user storage is in an external service. I think that's maybe where the awkwardness comes in.
Okay.
I don't really care about the auth handshake. Like someone else can do all that and then tell me here is who that is, the authentication part. But like I think I want to store like a user object in my own system. I just don't care about storing the sessions and like, like doing the auth integration, all that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, they are double storing that, right? Cognito calls that they're storing their
yeah, and then what that breaks is if I want to do, so the thing with Cognito is I wanted to do a test where I created a user and then called the GraphQL API, and you just can't do that because the Cognito owns all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that brings up a good point, Dax. I think, I'm not saying we should do this, but like if somebody was to do this, they should split the two of them up. It can be the same project, but split the two parts up and let people adopt one or the other or both. But implement in a way that they are like loosely coupled.
Which it looks like that's what Passport is, because they don't store.
They just
like
do one.
I just looked up like Postgres or something. They're not like storing a user for you.
Yeah.
And even Next.js auth, I think, works the same way, where it just gives you like an authenticated email. Like this email is definitely this person, and then you have to resolve like the user object behind it.
So wait, so then let's think about this. Is that can we implement like our own storage thing with Passport?
Sorry, say that again.
Like Passport does the authentication type stuff, and we store. Like if you were to implement the user storage part of Passport, can you do that?
I think it's hard to implement it in a way that works for everyone. I think that's for each product to determine. Like for me, for my project, I have a very specific way I need to do it, and not a single auth service supports it when they want to store it for me. Like it depends. Like if you have like, if you're a B2B app, you have this concept of like a tenant or like a workspace, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
Your users are scoped to the workspace. But if I don't remember what workspace I'm a part of, I should just be able to come to your homepage, put in my email, authenticate my email, and then it should list out all the workspaces I have access to, like how Slack works. None of these auth services really, they kind of block that. Like they make that hard.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. Yeah, let me think this through. Okay, so Passport, and then how would you use Passport if you wanted to store it yourself? Like I'm just like a developer, I just want to use Passport.
Yeah, I think it's similar where like they have a let's look through this. Okay, so they have a serialized user function which you can implement, and a deserialized one. So I think like you like resolve. Okay, if you're telling me that this is the ID that this person's proven, like here's the
user.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that makes sense to me.
Okay, I think I got it. There's a session management and there's a user management. The session management can definitely be outsourced. The user management is, I think people get in trouble when they start to put that in external systems.
Right. Okay,
and that actually makes sense. That's why super tokens is called super tokens. It's all about like tokens, not about
just session.
The underlying thing. Yeah.
Okay, so then how would I run? Again, these are just like really dumb questions because we haven't like looked into Passport. But like, how would I run Passport to store my sessions? right?
Yeah, I
Because
don't know.
like,
I
let's
have
say
to, I have
super
to see
token.
how this. This is another part where we're using GraphQL. So do we provide a predefined bunch of resolvers to do like passport stuff,
Right.
or do you write that yourself? Like this is all around Express and like making
Yeah.
routes, which maybe that's it's just hard to like come up with a universal thing that is still
Wait a
useful.
minute. So then what we're really looking for, actually, yeah, I saw that on their homepage. If you go back to their homepage, it's like, so this is like something for, it's a middleware for Express that lets you do this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's assuming like, hey, you're running an Express server. This is what it does. What we're kind of looking for is like something that runs on Lambda.
I think we are
Yeah.
also using an Express server, are we?
No, we're not.
We as in for GraphQL.
That's one of the things
yeah,
that we got rid of when we got moved away from Apollo.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that makes a bit more sense. So we're looking for a modern passport that runs on Lambda API gateway.
Yeah, a modern passport that's not coupled to Express.
Right. Yeah.
It's doing like maybe like 20% less than what Passport does.
Right. And then I'm assuming Passport comes with like the front end libraries and stuff, right?
I actually don't know. I don't think so.
Because like the session has to be managed on the front end.
No, I think you have to post to the route.
But like, is the front end saving in local storage? Like,
Oh, it
that's
might just
new?
set cookies from the server, so the front end doesn't need to like
I mean,
actually do anything.
You can't, right? Like, 'cause you can. I don't know. I need to look into this, but like.
Yeah, I think the server just sets the session cookie, and then the front end
Okay.
can just do like it's not even aware that it's authenticated. Yeah, I don't think I see anything front end related here.
Because that's the thing when I look at like Amplify and Cognito, right? Like Amplify is doing that part for you, right? And you've wrapped around this, this. Oh, sorry, you've wrapped around the Cognito JS SDK, right? So you know this, right?
Yeah, the thing though is I actually don't think they're doing it correctly. I think if we were to build our own, we should do it off of cookies because that's like the most correct way. Because if you don't have a single page application and like you're not like it doesn't that just won't work for you. I just haven't thought about this a lot, but I do feel like a lot of these auth libraries are really front end heavy when there's a question of does it really need to be?
Okay. If I take a step back, the other strategy here is to basically to shift our scope back. So this is similar to what you were saying, I think, yesterday, where it's like we have a bare bones non-auth version of the GraphQL stack, and then we have a version of, whether it's an example, tutorial, whatever, we have a version of the GraphQL stack with Cognito, like Cognito implemented, right? And we can decide if we want to provide like client libraries, like what we've worked on before, right, for Cognito, right? And then over time, we're just like, okay, you can use, here's the implementation for Auth0, and so on and so forth. But we're not stepping into Auth just yet. We're just showing you how to use this with all these other ones. And if it looks a little ugly because Cognito sucks, right? That's what it is for now. The point being that like we went deeper into Cognito and we found that the experience that we would want to provide if we actually wrapped around auth isn't great. So we're not ready to commit to Cognito just yet.
Yeah. and someone just messaged in the comments. That's like a good example of why storing the user incognito sucks.
No Java, no. I have an identity provider which uses this. Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like you have a way you want the application to behave, but you have this weird constraint from your auth provider.
Yeah. I'm kind of zoomed in here, so I can't actually see the comments properly. I have to like shift over every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I agree. I think we do a version without auth. We can help people integrate various things with it. If at some point there's like a clear path to, hey, like SSD auth is a thing now.
Yeah.
That's like a whole thing we can release. And
Yeah, the reason I'm sort of hesitant on this one is because auth is just so fundamental, and if you really want to have a very good ideal stack with the console and all of that, you kind of have to do it to a certain extent. But I think this discussion sort of helped in that, like, you can cut the scope in many different ways, right? Like, you can cut the scope at like session management, you can cut the scope at user management. Our console is helping you do quote unquote user management if you're using Cognito, right? That's what our console kind of does. And it's a bit awkward because we're not going too deep into Cognito. We're basically just saying, if you're using Cognito, we give you a way to manage users, right? But you have to go like figure out whether you use the Amplify JS or you use Cognito's JS directly. Like, you figure those parts out.
yeah. Yeah, I think even when we roll auth, it shouldn't be like a closed, like hosted service type of thing. It should be like, right, pick open source. If we don't do it ourselves, pick open source. They can configure however they want. It's not like we have everything built in. We wrap around like social login and everything, right? It's up to them if they want to do passwordless. That part of configuration is up to them, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's funny because as a meta point of like, if this was a Zoom call, I would be annoyed that it's 2 hours long. But since it's a stream, I'm not that annoyed.
I think you guys might have not felt it this much. Like when I'm writing up the doc and stuff,
Right.
like auth construct is like the worst to write up because Cognito is so confusing, and since we're providing a construct, it's like
it does fall on us. Yeah.
fall on us to explain to people. But it's so confusing, and then it sucks. Like explaining that you have to make up your mind if you want to do phone login and no email login, right? Otherwise, you can't change that down the road.
Yeah,
I think this is a good point. Yeah. Because by naming our construct auth, we're effectively saying we're taking on Cognito. Right? If this was called Cognito auth and we're just like, hey, there's just a light wrapper around Cognito, like, you have to know how to use Cognito to use this. That's a bit different, I feel. Right? Like in terms of like the CDK, in terms of the SST v1 API, it should be inside the CDK props. Like, we shouldn't lift it.
Yeah. David said the other day, right? David said you guys need to lift a lot more stuff from the auth construct, right? He's doing everything in CDK.
Sorry, who said this?
David Martin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think another thing I want to do is some of the companies using SST that are kind of a little bit bigger, like they're still startups, but they're bigger, like Plane and Acre. Right, I don't think either of them are using Cognito. I want to see what setup they land.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, let's maybe talk to some of them, because So okay, so I do know some, and this is not truly like they're not totally on SST, but I know Covey. I think they use Cognito, right, Frank?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering because the question I have is if people started with SST, they saw SC auth, and they started using it for their project, and if it's like a longer term project, like, are they fine just continuing to use it, or are they like regretting it?
Another like pretty well established company that uses Cognito is Seed.
Yeah.
It is. I think it when I was doing the single sign-on stuff, like it
Right,
being
right. Yeah,
out
I
of the
remember that.
box, the hardest part was reading our doc. The actual implementation is actually 2 lines, so that was
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean, if I'm thinking really, really broadly, I feel like I've tried enough of the auth services to. I think I have a feel for like, and it's, of course, is a bet that there's a million of them, but the reason there keeps continuing to be more and more is because everyone is like a little bit off. But I feel like maybe we can make the one that isn't. But maybe that's what everyone thinks, and everyone ends up in the same place.
Yeah, that's why I think this probably is like the one that we were sort of saying. It probably is that like you have to split this up um, and do like specific implementations for like Lambda.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is there's certain products that have a really complete auth flow. Like I think Slack has a very complete one. Like you can single sign on into a very specific workspace. You can integrate with whatever you want. You can just email login. If you forgot like what your workspace is, you can email login. Just like it's very complete. And I don't think I hadn't in my research, I hadn't found an auth provider that just lets you drop in that level of completeness into your application. So
Yeah,
that to me
I
is
think
the ultimate
that's
goal.
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, most of them do get stuck at like a much smaller scope.
Yeah. Like I'm just starting to see ones that like even mention multi-tenancy as like a primary concept.
okay. Maybe let's move on. Maybe let's take the perspective of we don't include auth for now,
Yeah, we just have an example of how do you do Cognito.
but I'm going to like take Dax thing and then go play around with stuff. I might
Or
try
the other
different
version is
things, right?
we implement like this one has an example app with Cognito in it, but we're just like using Cognito as is. We don't do anything for it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I guess my question
right.
Yeah,
go
because
ahead.
my question is like, does it make sense as an outsider? You come in, you try the ideal stack, and it's without auth, right? Like, this is why, like, when I wanted to do the sort of notes app, it was like you have to have auth in there. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, it feels like a toy. Go on, Frank.
Yeah. I think the example thing is that I want to like bring up like in a bit. Like anything else you want to go over? For the auth, that's everything, right? For now. Yeah. Okay. If you're done, if you're done discussing auth, then a question kind of related to this, there are different type of auth, different type of database. How are we handle all these different variations, right? One way is through examples. We just have an example with ideal stack plus Dynamo, ideal stack plus Mongo. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was thinking maybe we introduce the concept of variations to our preset stuff so that you can specify like, okay, I want the ideal stack, but I want the RDS version or I want the Dynamo version. Obviously, we can't go too crazy with this because we can't support like 6 different dimensions and like every combination of those. But I feel like the database one is a good one that feels like high level and something that it's worth putting there.
Yeah, there's also
Outside
the
of that,
other
I feel like
side.
we have some examples. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry. All I was gonna say was like, I think if we take this approach of like it's GraphQL first, but we also show you how to do like a route with just REST. If we do that approach, and maybe it doesn't even have to be a separate example. It's just like that example, like the base one actually does both.
Yeah, for sure. For like just a basic
Does that
REST
make
route.
sense? To you
Yeah,
guys?
we should
Yeah,
include
yeah,
that
yeah.
in the base.
Yeah, you
What do you
should. I
think, Frank?
think almost everyone has like a webhook or some sort of callback, right?
Yeah.
We should have.
Yeah. So do we want to do a
Yeah.
TRPC demo? I know at some point Dax was like, you were saying that you could get it to that level. This was a few weeks ago, obviously. You were saying that you
Oh,
got the
there's
REST setup to be pretty good as well.
yeah, I think it's worth doing a TRPC, at least in an example. The other thing I was talking about was like the just straight up REST. And
With types?
yeah, with like so like everything I demoed with the end-to-end type safety, I think we can get it's going to require a lot of work. So we should only do it if we really feel like we want to have another paradigm that's equally is on the same level as the GraphQL stuff. But I think we can get a lot of the end-to-end type safety if we integrate certain tools.
That's
We'll have to
interesting
build a
because
little bit ourselves. Yeah.
I see. Because then if I take a step back and I looked at this like starter, it's like there's one route that's like the GraphQL one, and then there's a sampled route of like a REST one. But the idea that like for this app you get end-to-end type safety still applies regardless of like what you end up using. That's pretty appealing to me. You don't have we don't have to do that for like version one, but that actually does sound pretty appealing.
Yeah, I think the thing though is you would never really use both together. Like I don't. Would you have a GraphQL API that your front end talks to, and also some REST endpoints your front end talks to?
Maybe
guess
not the same
maybe.
front end, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I
Because
think
like
eventually we'll
the
want to figure
types are
out
coming
end-to-end type
from
safety on the REST.
right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because the types are coming from again like the idea of like the single source of truth, right? Like
Yeah.
regardless of the client, the types are coming in from the same spot. Regardless of whether you're using GraphQL or like REST, you still kind of want the idea of end-to-end type safety, right?
Yeah.
Because the source of types is like before it even hits your GraphQL.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like that quite a bit. That jives with the idea of like our API construct just being, like all APIs, and we have a way to have complete type safety on just APIs in general.
Yeah, we would effectively build something like Pothos, but for
Right.
REST stuff. So you like define your
Interesting.
routes and like the arguments and the return type, and then we can generate some kind of, and then from that we should be able to generate a. There's that standard Open API file, and then from there, there's like an Open API to like React Query generator, I think, so that you can just get a hook on the front end for every single route you have.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you think about that one, Frank? Is that like not a version one thing, but I do feel like that's really valuable.
Yeah.
It's like us going all in on like end-to-end type safety. Right?
Yeah, I'm realizing the place where this will come up for people if they're working on a B2B app that needs an API and they're in a space where their customers are not as modern, you're not going to be able to give them a GraphQL API. You need to like also give them a REST API, but you might want to use a GraphQL one internally.
Yeah. For me, it's just that like the end-to-end type safety, right? Like it's just a thing.
Yeah,
on
it's
its
good. That should
own,
be the default.
regardless
Anything
of-
we do should support
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you think about it that way, that makes sense to me as the ideal stack, as opposed to ideal stack with GraphQL, ideal stack with just right? Like I don't like that. That doesn't make as much
Yeah.
sense. That's very different from like which database provider or which auth provider you use. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like they're not the same like thing to combine. Especially if we're gonna be like the GraphQL and the regular API come together in just the API.
Yeah, so I guess the idea is the properties of the ideal stack are works great with serverless, it has end-to-end type safety. The rest of the details don't matter. Like you'll get those two no matter whether you're using RDS, Dynamo, GraphQL, REST.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Next steps. What are we doing next?
Um,
What do you think, Frank?
I think DAX still need some work on this. Just clean stuff up, move stuff to the packages. Yeah, and then we are going to let's try it out.
Okay. We've got few viewers, and by few I mean 8. Then we just got any questions before we log off.
Yeah.
That would be helpful. But for the next step, it's we try it out, and then we'll do a Q&A stream for the ideal stack, and everybody can post their questions and stuff leading up to that, and then we'll talk about them.
We should post the GitHub URL in the Slack. Tell people we're going to do Q&A on Monday, let's say, or something, and
I don't know. Do you think it'll be Monday? It's up to you. Yeah, I have a bunch of other stuff to do with this.
Monday.
Yeah, sometime next week we'll give people like warning, advance notice.
Yeah, you need some time. Yeah, to play around with it.
Right, and then pick a date. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll pick a launch date. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions. Yeah, I think we're logging off. All right.
All right.
See you guys.
All right. See you guys on Slack.